Hey, welcome back to the Conservative Cat Show. Hey, this is where we smell smoke when politicians lie. And we don't mind sounding the alarm when taxpayer dollars go up in flames. So that's going to bring us to this madness. Today's show is about firefighters, politicians, pensions, and we are sounding the four-alarm or the four alarm fire. So we are sounding the alarm for the four alarm fire that is Illinois fiscal policy. So we're going to be digging into it. I'm your host, Kat, and I appreciate you being here where we rip off the mask of the madness, where it's in Springfield, Chicago, Washington, D.C. There's just complete and utter madness. And our job here is to rip the mask off of the madness and expose it for what it is. We are going to be talking about how hundreds of millions of dollars for these firefighters, there's going to be tons of taxpayer dollars allocated to these firefighters. Now, I am not anti-firefighter. I will be getting into it. But he signed off on this bill, Governor J.B. Pritzker, and now your taxpayer dollars are burning up. And we are also going to be talking about those Texas Democrats. We've been talking about that last week and this week. They have made a pretty dumb move in going to Chicago. And I mean, at this point, we just have to laugh at them. They came up to Chicago, of all places, the most gerrymandered state, probably in all of the nation, Illinois. It's a complete joke. It's one of the most corrupt states. And I guess they got a crash course from Governor J.B. Pritzker on how to be corrupt or whatever. And now there are arrest warrants. They voted, and there are arrest warrants for some of these Democrats who fled from doing their jobs, really. Doing the jobs that we elected them to do, and then doing the jobs, or well, that Texans elected them to do, and doing the jobs that they're paid to do with taxpayer dollars. So we're going to get into all of it. Plus, of course, more from Illinois. There's this woman. She's a Democrat representative, and she's at this like Mexican summit or whatever. It's like this anti-American organization, and it's a far leftist organization. And she's there speaking as like a guest speaker, I suppose. And she gets out on the microphone, and I guess she says, no, it's been translated by many Spanish speakers. I don't know Spanish, so I don't know exactly what she says, but from what the Spanish translators have, you run it through a Spanish translator, it translates to this, that she's a proud Guatemalan before she's an American. So that's what she said. So it doesn't get any crazier than that. She like denies her American allegiance. Okay, she's a Democrat congresswoman, Illinois Democrat congressman. She pledged her allegiance to really a foreign country over America. I've never seen anything quite that blatant in my lifetime. We are also going to be talking about a per mile tax that could be coming. So it's so funny. They didn't get their way with the delivery tax for the Chicago Transit Authority and the budget, the fiscal hole that they are in. They're going to be driving off this fiscal cliff here. I think they're going to feel the effects by December. There's calls for a special session right now to address this. Now they're talking about per mile taxes. So what a nightmare. Chicago Dems, they want to tax your truck. They want to tax all these rural people who, drive. And like, this is going to really affect the rural people the most because, we're rural drivers. It takes us 30 minutes to get anywhere to the Walmart. So they want to tax us to fund their public transit. So we're going to be getting into all of that. Smash that like button, share this out, subscribe. Be sure to follow me on all of the social media platforms. Visit patriotpumpenergy.com. Buy your bottle of premium pre-workout today. It is the best pre-workout out there. I'm telling you, there are no artificial colors. There is not an exorbitant amount of caffeine to get you addicted or sugars to get you addicted. I was drinking this one little drink at Dunkin'. It was. And I mean, I was shocked to find out how much sugar was in this thing. I took a sip of it. I ordered it not really thinking about the sugar, which is very rare. I usually just check the sugar before I order anything. But I was busy and I was like, okay, I just need like a quick pick me up. So I went through and I looked at the sugar in this thing, 40 grams of sugar, 40 grams. I was like, why? It's because they're trying to get you addicted on these energy drinks. And the way they do that is they load it up with sugar. There's zero sugar in Patriot Pump. And it's delicious. It's so much better for you than anything you could get through a drive through for sure. So let's get into today's story. Alderman Nicholas Sposato. He's in the 38th ward. So we're going deep into Chicago politics today. But it affects you if you live in Peoria, Rockford. You're going to be paying for Chicago. And that's the story of your life. You know, actually, I was talking to somebody yesterday. It was, I have to do some more digging on this. I don't know the history behind this. Maybe you know in the comments section. But Governor J.B. Pritzker, a couple of years ago, from what I gathered from this person, he's in the industry, he was telling me that a lot of people in Chicago don't pay their electric bills. And everybody's been talking about how their electric bill has doubled. Mine went up. I have Ameren, not ComEd. ComEd is further up north. Okay, my folks have ComEd. A lot of people I know have ComEd up north. I'm from up north. So what he was telling me, the guy who works in the industry, he was saying that a lot of people have they don't pay their electric bill. Okay, so there's like 2 million people in Chicago, and according to him, there's like 3/4 of those people who actually pay their electric bills. And because of something that Governor J.B. Pritzker did, which I am just going off of what this fellow in the industry was talking about, I have to dig into this, but it wouldn't shock me to find out that you can't shut off people's electric in the winter months. I did not even know that was a thing, okay, because it never used to be a thing. They'd come off and shut your electric off if you didn't pay your bills when I was a kid, okay? But now you can't. You can't shut off their electric bills, even if their electric, even if they don't pay their bills in certain months. So you can't just shut it off. So somebody's obviously got to pay for that because electric ain't free, right? This is a business. You can't shut off people's electric during the winter months, even though they're not paying for their electric. So who absorbs that cost? It's going to be, the law-abiding citizens, the good tax-paying citizens, the people who pay their bills. They're the ones who are going to have to foot the bill for the people who aren't paying their bills via surcharges. So my bill went up around 40%. I'm in central Illinois, further downstate, and I'm using Ameren. So our cents per kilowatt definitely went up. But it didn't go up as much as people that I've talked to who have ComEd. Who do you have? How much has your bill gone up? Throw a percentage in the comment section. That'll help me when I go and I dig up the history here. I'll have to dig it up. I didn't do it before the show today. I just want to do a little bit more research on it, but I'm sure there's a bill out there where Governor J.B. Pritzker said you can't shut people's electric off during the winter, which, I mean, folks, I am not a non-compassionate person, but you can definitely do some blankets and I think you'll be all right. But pay your bills, you know what I mean? You don't get the service if you don't pay your bills. I don't think that's and if you can't pay your bills and you're not able to afford a house to heat, then you got to go stay in a shelter. Okay. That's kind of my take on this whole thing, where it's you can't expect people via surcharges to keep, that's just a not sustainable thing, especially if it's a substantial amount of people up north Chicago population. If 3/4 of them aren't paying their bills in the winter months and you're not shutting off that, it's got to come from somewhere. Okay, money don't grow on trees, electric don't grow on trees. Anyway, I got off topic there. We're talking about Chicago, and I just think it's fascinating that we always have to bail out Chicago and the mess. Okay, I don't mind Chicago being a part of the state, but when they suck everybody dry, that's where you start to get the secession talks. Okay, there's 33 counties in Illinois right now who have talked about seceding from the state altogether, and it's because we are sucking our rural residents dry, and that's just not fair. So here's Alderman Nicholas Spizzato. He's a Chicago alderman, and he dropped a little truth bomb here. And he said, quote, I'm quoting him from the Center Square. He says, quote, firefighters haven't had a raise in 4 years. And now they're talking about finally getting what they're owed. People are freaking out that it's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Well, folks, it probably is. And there's a lot of smoke here. Than truth, a lot more smoke than truth here. So I want to clear the air. And he's not exactly wrong. The firefighters haven't been getting a raise every 4 years, and that's just not cool. Okay. They should definitely be getting raises. They shouldn't be living in 2025 off 2020 wages. Okay. So first things first, though, I've got to unpack this because Chicago firefighters, they have not gotten a raise in 4 years. That's ridiculous. Okay. These men and women run into burning buildings in this city, and really what city council did, they ran away from their responsibilities. They did other things, I'm sure, like pet projects. I know they did other things like NASCAR. Okay, the state, $5 million for stupid little things. $5 million specifically for NASCAR. But then there was other little pet projects, I'm sure, that they prioritized over these men and women who run into burning buildings, and that is on them. The city council and government, the state, ran away from their responsibilities when it came to paying these firefighters. Okay, they should have been getting raises. I'm not fighting, I'm not disputing that at all. But you don't have to support union politics to support basic fairness. Okay, basic fairness would have been raises adjusted for inflation every single year for the last 4 years, and that should have been prioritized. Why the hell it wasn't, I don't know. The Bible says, quote, Timothy, 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 18. And this is, I like to back everything up with scripture. Nothing I tell you here is not going to be, it is going to be backed by scripture. Okay, so the worker is worthy of his wages. Firefighters, they are definitely worthy of their wages, considering this is a job that requires extreme sacrifice. So much. It's your life, okay, in some situations. So, fair wages. Okay. Now that doesn't mean platinum pensions. Okay. Which is what we're talking about today. And the bill that Governor J.B. Pritzker signed, we're not talking about platinum pensions and for political favors in exchange for political favors, because that's what this is. And what Timothy chapter 5, verse 18 says, it says, if somebody does a hard job, they deserve to be paid. And they deserve to be paid on time. Okay, so yes, give them the raises that they've earned in 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024. Give them their raises, not in 2025, and not under this like headline hundreds of millions of dollars and back pay. Like this money isn't a bonus. This is a late paycheck. And every politician who stalled these contracts while inflation crushed these working families, shame on them. They shouldn't have stalled these contracts. Like at the end of the day, if they needed those pay raises, those firefighters, those Chicago firefighters. Okay, now while back pay for real work is totally fine, I'm okay with the back pay. If they weren't getting raises for 4 years, totally fine with back pay. Here's what's not okay with me and where I start to get kind of pissed off and what's dangerous. This talk in Springfield about enhancing tier 2 pension benefits. Okay. Now I've talked about tier 2. It gets a little boring and your eyes might glaze over. Wake up. I'll explain it. So let me translate enhancing tier 2 pension benefits for you. This is expanding pension promises that we already can't afford. Tier 2 versus Tier 1 is like a lower grade of a pension plan. And this was our way to kind of fix the pension debt. We have a pension crisis here in the state of Illinois, unfunded pension liability of $145+ billion. It's going up all the time. Now, here's what the news is today. House Bill 3637 went into effect immediately after Governor J.B. Pritzker signed it. And the headlines, they're all talking about fairness to the firefighters, but like, let's look into the fine print here because it tells a different story. This is about restructuring benefits, pension benefits, okay? And like I said, fine with the back pay. If they weren't getting raises and there was no contracts, negotiated, and they weren't getting those raises, yes, they should get the back pay. And really, it's not back pay. It's like, it's a late paycheck. They were entitled to that money. They should get that money. What I'm not cool with is restructuring our pensions and enhancing tier 2, restructuring benefits. And it opens the door here for massive unsustainable costs long after our current firefighters retire. Okay, so if we enhance the pension, tier 2 pension plans, our current firefighters, sure, they're going to get these nice premium pension plans, these platinum pension plans, but then the farmers after them, firefighters after them, the firefighters after them, the firefighters after them, they're going to keep getting these in platinum pension plans. Folks, Illinois already has the worst funded pension system in the country. We are sitting on $145 billion of pension debt, and the politicians, they want to sweeten the deal and sweeten these pensions even more. And who is going to pay for that? Who? You, me, our kids, your kids, my kids. Okay, they're going to wind up paying for this. And I support workers. I do. But what we don't support is more debt-backed political bribery. And that is exactly what this is. And they're masquerading it as reform, that, hey, we need pension reform for our fighter. Just pay them what they're worth, damn it. Give the laborer his wages, his fair wages, and stop enhancing these pensions. It's starting to get out of hand. Once you're done working, I'm not anti-pension, and I'll get to the private sector and what it looks like, but it's not like the pension system. 401ks, they're very different, and the private sector operates very differently when it comes to retirement. And it should operate like the private sector, but it's the public sector, so it's bloated and it's debt-backed and it's all really political bribery. So tier 2 isn't broken. The system is. Let's talk about tier 2 for a second, because that was a reduced pension plan created in 2011 to deal with, surprise, the complete disaster of tier 1. Now unions say tier 2 is unfair because it doesn't let people retire in their 50s with full benefits. Okay. Most people don't retire in their 50s. Most people retire at the age of 65, and it keeps going up. And then they also say that tier 2 is going to trigger safe harbor, which is a violation of the Social Security rules, which they have yet to show evidence that that's the case. Okay. And here's the question. Here's a question I want you to answer. Why should government employees automatically get better retirement deals than the people who are paying their bills? Okay, we pay their bills, we pay their salaries, we pay their pensions. Why should they automatically get better retirement deals than those in the private sector? You want to talk about fairness? Here's the way it works in the private sector. Go to the private sector where 401k, it rises and falls with the market. Okay, no one gets cost of living increases guaranteed, and the retirement age is going up. Okay, so you want to talk about fairness, it should reflect the private sector's retirement benefits. Retirement sucks. Okay, it sucks. You got to really save away your money. Okay, and in Illinois, they're talking about rolling back tier 2, enhancing tier 2 pensions for firefighters. But right now it's firefighters, which I'd be somewhat okay with, because these are first responders. Like I said, the laborer's wages should match his work. But specifically, that First Timothy is talking about people who are currently working, not talking about people who are retired and are collecting a pension. Okay. It's ridiculous that a guy, Barry Riley, the District 87 superintendent, former, retired, is collecting $200,000 something dollar pension. And then the guy running a much larger school district currently is getting paid like $100,000 in Peoria for Peoria school districts. It's a much, much larger school district. And that is not paying the laborer his fair wages. Barry Riley is no longer a laborer in that he's retired. So why the hell are we paying him more than the laborers who are currently still working? Makes no sense, okay? And it's the antithesis to what First Timothy is talking about there, these bloated pensions. So eventually they're talking about firefighters now. So I'm not even like totally anti-firefighters having platinum pension plans. They do give up their lives, okay, or potentially give up their lives, and they are performing a job that not a lot of people want to perform, and it's a sacrifice. But now you're going to start talking about, and this is what's going to happen as soon as this bill was signed, it sets a precedent. They're going to start talking about enhancing tier 2 for teachers, for cops, for these administrators in these school districts, okay? They are going to be able to cash in early. In their 50s, retire with these platinum pension plans, couple hundred thou. Some of these administrators in these school districts, like I told you, they're getting a couple hundred thou in a form of a pension. Okay, that's not fairness. That is theft from the taxpayer. And it's not at all similar to what the private sector does when it comes to retirement. Okay, like I said, 401ks, they rise and fall with the market. No one gets cost of living increases guaranteed. And the retirement age is going up, not down. With these pension plans, some of these people are able to retire in their 50s, which is kind of unheard of in the private sector. If you're working in a company, I mean, I know people who work even until they're like 90 or something like that, but some people can't retire until the age of 65. I think that's retirement age now, but it keeps going up and up and up. So let me be crystal clear. Chicago firefighters, yes, if they weren't getting, and these contracts were stalled and they weren't getting this adjusted for inflation pay raises for the last 4 years, from 2020 to 2025, last 5 years, if they weren't getting those pay raises, yes, they 100% deserve their late paycheck and their back pay. Not because they're union, but because they are laborers who deserve a fair wage, not because they vote a certain way, okay, but because they did a job and the city delayed their contract and they weren't getting those pay raises. I'm okay with giving them back pay, but the pensions, don't let them confuse you. That is a totally different topic. Enhancing tier 2 is not a good thing. Pensions are promises about the future. And if we keep making the same promises that bankrupted Detroit, California cities, Puerto Rico, guess what? We're next. We're going to go bankrupt. There is no way we are going to be able to address this elephant that is now in the room, the $145 billion pension debt. Okay, I don't oppose firefighters. I know you don't. We oppose the system, okay, that politicians use to trap taxpayers into forever debt and in forever debt. So who benefits from all of this? Not the new guy with 5 years on the job, okay? Not the guy who's currently fighting fires. It's the union bosses and the career politicians who cut the sweetheart deals for the unions, for these pension plans. And then they, disappear with their own golden parachutes, okay? It's all the union bosses who are benefiting from it. These are not the current firefighters. These are not the people who are running into burning buildings. These are people who have been retired. They're benefiting like crazy from the enhancement of tier 2. Or the people who are these current firefighters, they will benefit from the enhancement of tier 2, but it's the future generation or the future firefighters who are going to continue to benefit from tier 2. That makes sense. Sorry, I went on a rabbit hole there, but the Christian worldview, I want to bring this home biblically, because it teaches us, the Bible, to be wise stewards of what we've been given. And this includes public money. So Proverbs 22:7 says, the borrower is slave to the lender. Yet Springfield keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing from the future to pay off political debts in the present. And that's not compassion, that's cowardice. And that leads to a government that can't afford to fix roads or pay for police or pay for the firefighters raises when they come every single year. They're not able to pay for all of that because they keep borrowing from the future to pay off political debts of the present, and that's just not, it's not sustainable. They're not going to, like, we are drowning in these pension promises. So let's not forget the working mom who pays property taxes that are very, very high. She can't afford groceries because of her property taxes. Or the small business owner who's taxed to death. They don't get tier 1. They don't get tier 2 pensions. Okay. We can't forget those folks. They don't even really get a thank you for what they do. Okay. Because they're not in public service. Yet working mom who, serves you every single day at the diner she works at, she's just as important as, the firefighter. Nobody's no less important just because of what they do. They should get paid more, I'm not going to lie, firefighters, than, rangers, considering that they're working a very dangerous job, right? And that should reflect that. But she's not getting the pension. Okay. Tier 1, tier 2, none of it. She's not getting any of that. And the business owner who's taxed to death, he's not getting tier 1, tier 2. So here's our stance here on the Conservative Cat Show. Yes, pay the firefighters what they're owed. Give them their annual pay raises. What the hell's wrong with you, Chicago? Why'd you delay their contract and not give them the raises when they were supposed to get their raises? Pay them what they're owed for what they've already done. Okay. Now, here at the Conservative Cat Show, we do not, let me repeat, want to expand tier 2 pensions and destroy any, we don't even have fiscal sanity. I was going to say destroy any little fiscal sanity that we have left here in Illinois. I don't even think we have any fiscal sanity left, but expanding this would really destroy what tiny fiscal sanity we have here in the state of Illinois. They say no to expanding the tier 2 pension plan, and we need to stop using workers as pawns in political games, and we need to clean up house in Springfield and in Chicago and start weeding out these corrupt bureaucrats who have made this mess, the pension crisis mess. You need to start weeding them out and cleaning up Springfield. So what happened here wasn't just a failure to pay the firefighters. It's a failure to lead. It's a failure to govern. It's a failure to respect the people who foot the bill. And the person who foots the bill is you, the Illinois taxpayer. And they just don't have any kind of respect for you. So support your firefighters, protect your paycheck, guys. Try to, get Chicago to do their freaking jobs and give you the pay raises when you're supposed to get them. But at the end of the day, it's not fiscally responsible to expand tier 2 for firefighters, for anybody, whether that's firefighters, teachers, whatever, cops, whoever they've got next. Now, the signing of this sets a really bad precedent because this has been going on in Springfield for quite some time, where they've talked about enhancing tier 2. Now they're finally doing it, but they're doing it piece by piece with legislation. And now this legislation sets the precedent, and it is not sustainable to enhance that. We are going to go bankrupt like Detroit or like Puerto Rico, some cities in California. All right, so let me shift gears. I do want to talk about the Texas Republicans who voted to arrest dozens of Democrat legislators who fled the state, fled Texas, and they really are blocking the passage of this plan to redraw the electoral boundaries to favor the Republicans slightly. Now, we have to remember a lot of what's been going on, California, New York, Illinois, a lot of these people in these blue-dominated cities like Chicago, New York City, LA, right? They've all been fleeing from these areas to Texas and to Florida. And what Texas is trying to do is say, hey, we've got to redraw this map because of population changes. These urban people are, kind of making Texas blue, and that's not really reflective of the entire state. It just so happens that these Democrats keep moving here. So, I mean, I don't blame them for wanting to create more Republican districts because they are really being infiltrated by blue liberals who are fleeing their liberal states, okay? And they don't want those liberals swaying their election. So what they're going to do is they're swaying their representation in a massive way. So what they've done here, I think, is pretty fair. They've redrawn the map to kind of deal with that. And honestly, fight fire with fire. I have no problem. New York, Illinois, California, they've been doing the gerrymandering for quite some time. Look at our congressional seats. We've got 14 Democrats, 3 Republicans. We've pretty much contained all Republican representation here in the state of Illinois. We barely have any Republican representation here in the state of Illinois as far as congressional districts go. They've gerrymandered the hell out of these maps to where there are zero, really practically zero Republican representation. So I don't blame Republicans in Texas for wanting to fight fire with fire. I think that it's fair. If you guys are going to play these gerrymandering games in these blue states, and then all of a sudden your blue state liberal hacks, your oat milk latte sipping vegans come down here and start changing our state and the demographics of our state, we are going to accommodate it, and we're going to, figure out a way to where their vote doesn't sway the entire state, because that's just not fair. So after the vote, after the vote where Republicans voted to arrest these dozens of Democrat legislators who fled to Chicago to avoid really their job, Greg Abbott ordered state troopers to locate, arrest, and return to the House chamber any member who has abandoned their duty to Texans. Now, yesterday I talked about this. This is a special session that doesn't just have to deal with redistricting, and I don't want that to get lost. This special session also deals with aid for the flood victims. So shame on them. They should be doing their damn jobs, and helping these flood victims. So Abbott also threatened to charge the absent Democrats with bribery, felony bribery, because if they raised raised money, from these left-wing organizations to help cover this daily fine, I think it's of $500 for boycotting the chamber, they get a daily fine. Now, the Democrats are paying that off, obviously, with left-wing fundraising efforts. He says that that's actually a violation of bribery or felony bribery, and he threatened to charge them with that. So the redrawn congressional map would create 5 Republican-leaning seats in the U.S. House of Representatives in Washington, D.C., where Republicans currently hold a very slim majority. So obviously, this would be very good for Republicans in 2026. I'm going to take a quick sip of coffee here. Okay, so Texas Democrats have become famous, essentially, or infamous, depending on who you talk to, for cutting and really running to try to stop Republican state lawmakers from passing legislation that they don't happen to like. Okay, and this is obviously a threat to democracy. Anytime you have somebody who plays stompy foot or acts like a screaming toddler, when there's debate, healthy debate going on, the redraw the maps every 10 years. This is nothing crazy, okay? We're unprecedented. This is just kind of like a routine to redraw the maps. Just because they don't like it doesn't mean they get to flee, okay? That's not democracy, and play stompy foot until they get what they want. That's actually tyranny. So they might call themselves fighters of democracy, but they're actually the antithesis of that. They are the opposite of fighters for democracy. They're actually taking a dump all over democracy with this little stunt that they've pulled. And they actually did this not only in 2025, history repeats itself. They did it in 2021 with this whole voter ID rights or voter ID laws that they were voting on. So Democrats, they fled into the arms of none other than J.B. Pritzker. Let me get to some of your chats this morning. Dan, maybe the critics of the Texas redistricting should look at the Illinois map that Jellybean is so proud of. He continues his presidential bid. Yeah. So J.B. Pritzker, he, opened his arms to these Texas Democrats. And Sunday, a couple of days ago, the Republicans in Texas unveiled their new congressional map, and some have called it and went as far as to call it a bloodbath for Democrats headed in 2026 midterms. I don't think so. Okay. I don't think it's a bloodbath. I think it's going to be good for us. I don't think that is going to win us the 2026 midterms by itself. We definitely need to flip some seats. Okay. So here's what the Texas Democrat Caucus Chair, Jean Wu, had proclaimed in a statement. She said, here it is. We're not talking about our responsibilities. We're not walking out on our responsibilities. We're walking out on a rigged system that refuses to listen to the people we represent. As of today, this corrupt special session is over. That is what the Texas chair, Jean Wu, Jean Wu, had said said in a statement. Okay. So this is pretty infuriating on one hand, but on the other hand, you have to almost laugh out loud at these people. There's nothing that we can do at this point other than to laugh at these people, because I am going to point out here again that Illinois is one of the most corrupt, blatantly rigged Democrat political machines in the country. I mean, it's so blatant. It's a running joke how corrupt Illinois is, and this is not exactly the brightest idea that Texas Democrats have had. Why didn't they just hold a little protest in Washington, D.C., flee to Washington, D.C., outside the Capitol steps or something? You chose to go run into the arms of a guy who is practically giddy with the gerrymandering that he's done. He signed these gerrymandered maps in 2021. Texas Democrats, they went to a blue state that is well known for gerrymandering. I don't know whose PR idea this was, who came up with this bright idea. It sucks. It's a terrible idea. Why didn't you guys just, go to Washington, D.C. to protest outside the Capitol steps? That's what I would have done. Why run into the arms of Governor J.B. Pritzker? Texas Democrats, they also, some of them left to meet with Kathy Hochul of New York. And here's what Kathy Hochul says. She says, I won't sit on the sidelines while Republicans try to rig the system to give Donald Trump more unrigged power. Oh my gosh. This has nothing to do with Donald Trump, by the way. This has everything to do with Congress. Now, Donald Trump being a Republican probably doesn't mind that there's going to be 5 extra seats, right? 5 Republican seats in Texas. But that doesn't give him any more power. Take a look at what Donald Trump has had to do executive order. He's pretty much been operating his entire presidency via executive order. And look at the hell he had to go through with BBB. Look at the pushback he got from Elon, from members of his own party. Okay. He had to go through hell when it came to Congress passing the BBB. So Congress gaining more seats isn't necessarily a great thing. More Republican seats isn't necessarily a great thing for Donald Trump's agenda. Okay. Especially because we don't know how those seats are going to be filled. They could be filled with rhinos for all we know. And it might be detrimental to the America First agenda that Donald Trump wants to push. He barely got through, really, I'm going to be honest, the BBB. Despite Republican majority. It's a slim majority, but despite that. So if we have a slightly higher majority, I don't know. I don't think it's really going to go one way or another for the Trump agenda. Okay. Donald Trump would still have to work pretty hard in order to push his agenda through because Congress just hates him for some odd reason. Republicans and Democrats alike, they just aren't, they aren't America first. So Hochul goes on in her statement. She says Texas Democrats are standing up for the future of our democracy. Wrong. They're anti-democracy. Clearly, their actions show they're anti-democracy. They're upset about the whole process of democracy where they debate on legislation. They lose with grace. It goes to a vote. They won't even participate in the vote. They flee from voting until they get what they want. And that's called tyranny. Okay. But she continues. She says, I'm proud to stand with them and fight against this disenfranchisement. So let's take a listen here to Kathy Hochul and her statement.
For Republicans in Texas, this is no longer the Wild West. We're not going to tolerate our democracy being stolen in a modern day stagecoach hoist by a bunch of law-breaking cowboys. Americans don't want a system that's stacked against them. They believe in fairness. It's fundamental. I'll tell you this, they're done with the chaos. They're done with the cruelty. And I would say they're ready to vote Republicans out of power in Washington, certainly in the upcoming 2026 elections. Republicans know this. They've seen the polls. They know they're sliding downhill because Americans are rejecting their policies. So this is why they're fighting. They want to, they know they'll lose the elections, but to subvert the will of the people, they're hell-bent on rigging the system. And I have news flash for Republicans.
All right. So there you have it. That's Kathy Hochul, right? Because if there's a state in this country that stands up for democracy and is so democratic, it's definitely New York. Stands up for democracy and their voters. It's definitely New York. Yeah, like you guys didn't lock down people and force them to get vaccines and fire them if they didn't comply. Oh yeah, you guys are totally Democrat fighter or democracy fighters. Give me a break. Really, New York has fought, like Illinois, to contain Republican representation to a very, very bare minimum. And look no further than our congressional seats. We have 3 Republican congressional seats and 14 Democrat. So that is the bare minimum of representation, Republican representation in Illinois. And if you ever were to take a drive, just take a drive and talk to some people. Most people you come across here in the state of Illinois are going to be red, God-fearing farmers who vote Republican, okay, and have a certain ideology, faith, family, working. That's just the Midwest, okay? Now, because of Chicago and the way they've gerrymandered the maps, you wouldn't know that most of the state is actually Republican. They've just gerrymandered the hell out of the state to where we have all Democrat representation. That's why Illinoisans are so pissed off, because they don't feel like they have a voice, and they don't in this state. So Texas Democrats have decided to flee their state to protest the partisan gerrymandering, which is ridiculous. They're really just fighting fire with fire. And to be honest with you, it needs to be done in Texas because of the fleeing that's been going on from Illinois, LA, California, Chicago, New York City. These people in these blue cities are fleeing to these red states. Why? Because it's cheaper, it's better, and they can afford life. Okay. And what Republicans, I think, are doing here in Texas is just ensuring that they don't bring their politics with them and that they continue to keep representation for the people who currently reside there. So, like I said, half of the Texas Democrats went to Illinois, half of them went to New York. And I just want to make this clear. This is kind of interesting in New York. It's especially hilarious because Democrats, they actually gerrymandered New York after the 2020 census. Much like Illinois, we gerrymandered. I think he signed the maps in 2021, JB. But their own liberal, here's the beauty about New York. Their own liberal state Supreme Court threw out the map, okay, because of this bipartisan commission who redrew it. A bipartisan commission had to redraw it because the Supreme Court threw it out and said that it was no good. And because of the bipartisan commission redrawing it, it actually led to Republicans gaining 20 seats in 2022. Okay, leading to a Republican gain in seats in 2022. After they had to redraw it because the state Supreme Court threw it out. Like, that's how bad it was gerrymandered. Like, the liberal state Supreme Court said, yeah, you can't do this. What's wrong with you? Get a bipartisan commission, redraw it. And it led to Republicans gaining in that. After which they withdrew it to eliminate 3 Republican seats. So in 2022, they had a gain, but then they redrew it to eliminate 3 Republican seats. So there has been a lot of gerrymandering. So since 2022, I think they've redrawn it. I don't know. I think I'm looking at the map now. I mean, there's just very little Republican representation in both Illinois and New York. And all you need to know is that the state Supreme Court at a time shortly after the 2020 census, when they redrew it, the liberal state Supreme Court there, they threw it out because it was that bad. So even some mainstream media, and I want to share this with you, some mainstream media have been talking about this Texas thing. And they're saying that it looks really bad on Texas Democrats going to states like Illinois and going to these blue states like New York. So here's this guy. He's a journalist, a mainstream journalist, Andrew. I'm not even going to attempt his last name. He's a mainstream guy. And he says, was there nobody on the PR side who looked at this and said, maybe we shouldn't go to one of the most corrupt gerrymandered states in the country? So here's Cheryl Cole. She says, I'm headed to Chicago right now to stop this is a Texas Democrat, rigged redistricting process. We can't allow Donald Trump and Greg Abbott to steal power from the people with these proposed congressional maps. And naturally, they've done the race baiting thing. They've said that the maps are racist and that it disenfranchises Black and Latino voters. It's ridiculous. I don't think anybody, on the PR side of things looked at this and said, hey, we probably shouldn't go to Illinois. Apparently nobody, looked at this thing for what it was. And it is a total PR nightmare because now they've got to answer to why they fled to the most gerrymandered state in all of the nation, one of the most corrupt states in all of the nation, Illinois. All right. I want to get to the CTA. I've talked about this a lot. There's some developments. I do have to take a quick break, but you're listening to Conservative Cat. I'm going to take a quick break. We're going to come back and we're going to get into it because Chicago Democrats are floating this idea of a $1.5 billion transit rescue package. Really what this is liberal speak for is a transit funded bailout or taxpayer funded bailout, and rural people, you and I, Peoria, your Decatur, we're going to have to be bailing out Chicago again. And that's what this is really about. This is about propping up a collapsing Chicago Transit Authority, a system that's very bloated, delayed, crime-ridden. Even the pigeons probably wouldn't want to ride the red line. Okay, they refuse to ride the red line. But now they're talking about a per mile tax. No, the delivery tax didn't get through. So they've had to get creative and they've had to figure out a way to tax you to fund this bloated system. And now they're talking about a per mile tax. I'm going to be right back. You're listening to Conservative Cat. Hey, this is Conservative Cat Clips, and this is the place where we remind you that your children come from God and they don't come from the Department of Education. The government wants to raise your kids. They want to feed them breakfast. They want to tell them about gender ideology and gender identity as young as kindergarten. They want to start them out really early. They want to tell your kids how many pronouns they should have, and they want your kids to learn all the pronouns by the age of 3rd grade. Okay. Meanwhile, they can't keep bathrooms clean in their schools. They can't keep their test scores up, reading, writing, and arithmetic. They can't keep those scores above sea level. The truth here is that bureaucrats don't love their kids. They don't know their quirks, their fears, their hearts, and they certainly don't care what the Bible says about fearing or about raising them and fearing the Lord. Okay, so in Psalm 127, verse 3, children are a heritage from the Lord, not a project for the state, not a cultural science experiment. They are your responsibility, your blessing, and your mission. Okay, but what happens if you step in and they say, I'll take it from here? Okay, and what happens when you step in and say, hey, I'm actually going to take responsibility and I'm going to participate in raising my child? You show up to the school board meetings, you ask about the curriculum, you object to Drag Queen Story Hour and Drag Queen Library Story Hour and all of these pornographic books in the libraries. What happens when you say, I'm going to take it from here, I'm going to start participating in my mission and my responsibility in raising up my child? You are deemed a domestic terrorist. Okay, if you start showing up and if you actually start taking responsibility over raising your child, you are dangerous to democracy. They'll say that. And they'll say that all because you just started loving your kid enough to be involved. So we've normalized this idea that parents should just hand over their kids for 8 hours a day and play catch up over a microwave dinner and try to catch up on who your kid actually is. Your kids are strangers. That's not parenting, that's outsourcing. So the product here is a generation that is anxious, that is confused, and they are spiritually hollow. What if we flipped the script? Really, what if we turned off the screens, cracked open a Bible, and actually parented the way Deuteronomy 6 tells us to parent, at home and all of the time? And I think that our future of the country actually depends on this. And I hope that we start parenting like our future and like the future of the country depends on it, because it does. So don't be intimidated. God gave you those kids for a reason. Raise them up in truth, teach them real values, and never hand over this sacred duty to the folks who say remote learning is the way to go, or gender identity, you can identify as whatever the hell you want. Don't hand over that sacred duty of parenting and raising your children to people who are just wacky weirdos. You can raise your children, and you are required to raise your children because they are a gift from God, and He's bestowed a sacred duty on you as a parent. This has been Conservative Cat Clips. Hey, good morning. Go ahead and smash that like button. Share this out with your friends. I'm digging into this. Is AOC married or not? So this raises some real ethical questions. She may be in ethical hot water here, AOC. And I mean, this question is really bubbling. Is she married or is she not? So we're going to be getting into that story in just a little bit. I do want to get to the Chicago Transit Authority and what they're kind of dreaming up as far as this per mile tax. They couldn't get their delivery tax, so now they've kind of dreamed up this per mile tax. Like I said, the Transit Authority, the Chicago Transit Authority, the CTA, this is a system that is bloated, delayed, crime-ridden. Even pigeons don't want to ride on the trains or use the public transportation. Now they want a special legislative session. That's right, because our tax dollars hard at work. They are not fixing the roads. They are not helping farmers. They are not protecting children from the child abuse that is going on within DCFS, obviously. Talked about that a couple of days ago. Go find the show archived on YouTube. While you're here, subscribe. Be sure you subscribe. Our tax dollars aren't going and to work for all of those things, fixing the roads, helping the farmers, protecting the children. But now our tax dollars are going to be used to hold an emergency meeting to figure out how to squeeze me harder so they can fund this CTA clown car. And that's what it is. It is a CTA nightmare. It's a CTA clown car. They don't know what the hell they're doing, and they want more of my money to play with. So enter stage left. We've got Senator Ram Villavalam. He is the North Side's very own Amtrak apologist. He's real into, so you start to pick up. So you got your Kelly Cassidy's, who's all into the queer thing, the LGBTQ thing. You've got your Ram Villavalams, really into public transit. Once you start covering a lot of this stuff with me over the years, you'll start to pick up on who's who and who does what type of legislation. Ram Villavalam is, an Amtrak apologist, is a public transit fiend. He's real into the DMV too, Secretary of State. He's all about that automatic voter registration. He's pushed bills for the automatic voter registration to be streamlined, which is so bogus. Like, we have the right to not vote just as much as we have the right to vote, right? And Democrats, they want to bloat the voter rolls, obviously, and they will stop at nothing to do just that, including automatic voter registration when you renew your license. So this is Ram Villavalam. He claims that downstate is going to get their fair share. He's bragging about the historic funding for 54 transit agencies outside of Chicago. All right. So what he's saying is that the CTA, and the transit authorities, there's transit agencies outside of Chicago that benefit downstate. So what he's saying here is, people in Peoria, people in Bloomington, people in Lincoln, Illinois, Springfield, that they use public transit all the time, and they go from Peoria to Chicago, from the Quad Cities to Chicago, and they're using public transportation all the time. When's the last time you rode a bus from Peoria to Chicago? Do you know anybody within your circle of your circle of friends who have actually rode public transit from Peoria to Chicago? Exactly. Most folks, they don't want to use the taxpayer funded system. The buses, they will use. They really want decent roads and affordable gas. Okay. We are just a driving culture. That is just the way America is. We just drive everywhere. Okay. But Ram Villavalam, he says this $200 million chunk of change is what your community is asking for. Okay. Your community in Peoria, your community in Decatur, your community in Bloomington, that we are just asking, we are begging for the $200 million chunk of money to be taken out and spent. I mean, that's what he's saying. I mean, or that we ought to do this because that is, to our benefit, and he brags about the historic funding of these 54 transit agencies outside of Chicago. Really? Really? Because I've never really met a rancher, a teacher, a retiree in Southern Illinois begging for this $1.5 billion mass transit package. Okay. I don't know anybody who's like hell-bent on public transit being a thing. Okay. And here's where it gets pretty dystopian. Villavalam and his big city pals, they aren't just asking for a bailout. They want to tax your mileage. Okay. So where are they going to get the money for the bailout? They want to tax the mileage. They talked about this earlier where they wanted to tax the deliveries. So if you got a pizza to your door, it would be like $1.50 delivery tax. Now what they want to do is tax you per mile. So per mile road usage tax. And every time you take your kids to school, to soccer practice, to you make a grocery trip, every time you run to church on Sunday, they want to track it, tally it, and tax it. Why? Because Southern and rural Illinois, we drive more and we live where the land is open, where the space is wide. We have to drive 30 minutes to Walmart for a grocery trip. And we don't live in places where public buses like automatically and magically appear every 12 minutes. Okay. We have lives that run on pickup trucks. Okay. And diesel and gas. Okay. We have those lives. We don't live on bike lanes and Zoom calls. Okay. We drive into work. This is just the way our life is. So now they're going to completely just, this is not equitable in any kind of way, equal, fair. The rural people are really going to get stuck with this per mile tax. And the rural people really aren't utilizing public transit as much as Ron Villalama thinks or says. Okay, so Senator Terry Bryant nailed it. He's out of touch. Villalama, he lives in this fantasy land where the only thing longer than a CTA delay is this line of, failed liberal policy. So in their fantasy land, they think that all their policies turn out to be good, but really it's just failed liberal policy after failed liberal policy. And he's just out of touch. Like, dude, I'm telling you right now, people aren't riding from Peoria to Chicago. People aren't riding from Decatur or Bloomington to Chicago on a bus. Okay, they're getting in the car. If they have to go to Chicago, they're getting in their car. Okay, it's just American culture. Like, deal with it. From a Christian worldview, let's call this what it is. It's bad stewardship. Scripture calls our leaders to care for their people, not burden them with endless taxation, to support failing systems. In Romans 13, it says that rulers are supposed to be servants for your good, not highway robbers in suits. Okay, that's essentially what they're doing here. And there's a little something called a subsidiary, and it's a belief that's rooted in both Scripture and the Constitution that problems should be solved at the lowest level possible. So that is a little thing that we have. And this is where the state isn't hoarding all of the authority and deciding from Springfield and Chicago what's best for all these little towns, okay, that they've never really stepped foot in. Even Chicago, if you have a hard time with your CTA and if you're having a hard time with this funding and with being fully funded and you need a $1.5 billion bailout, it needs to come at the local level. You guys need to figure out a revenue source from the local level. Sure, tax the Chicagoans, okay? Slap a Zoom call tax on them or something like that. I don't know. Slap a bike lane tax on them or something like that, okay, to pay for the public transit there. Why the hell are the people in Springfield deciding what's best for all these little towns, deciding what's best for Chicago? Really, they should just let Chicago deal with their mess, okay? And let's not forget who we're bailing out. The CTA has been bleeding Reading for decades. It is a government union boondoggle plagued with overstaffing, unaccountable contracts, and rising crime. So there have been reports of drug use on the trains, by the way, the train platforms. There's been reports of violence on these trains, zero accountability, and the people don't ride it because they don't feel safe. Now, in Bloomington, there is some public transit and some in Peoria as well. Like, they've got their own transit authorities in those areas. If you watch, nobody's riding on those buses. Nobody's riding on Connect Transit in Bloomington. I've literally watched one person got on and it rides around on the bus and then they drop them off, and that's about it. Usually it's just a place for homeless people to go and keep warm. That's usually what public transit is utilized for homeless people to go and ride around, okay? So people don't ride it. They don't feel safe on public transit. A lot of studies have showed that people don't feel safe on public transit. And the rise of Uber and Lyft is kind of it's just so dated. Like, public transit is so dated. It's kind of like public libraries. Like, in 2025, we've got things like Uber and Lyft. Yes, those are kind of expensive, but this is even more expensive if we're talking about $1.5 billion are in the hole. And then on top of that, you still have to pay for the train. You still have to pay for the fare. No, it's getting way too expensive. And why pay all of that when you can just pay for the Uber or for the Lyft? Okay, so here's the solution from the ivory towers that they have. Make the farmers in rural Illinois and Lincoln, Illinois, and Springfield, Illinois, and Effingham, make them pay more so the CTA workers can cash their union pensions, and they never see any kind of discipline at all. So that's what's going on with this. And let's take a quick imaginary field trip, if you will. Your dad in rural Illinois, and you've got a job in construction, you've got 4 kids, and you've got a church softball league and a farm to tend, okay? One day you hop on the shiny new state-funded downstate connector bus to go from Effingham to Chicago, and it's completely empty. And the driver says to you, well, we're running on schedule regardless of demand. This is such a waste of taxpayer dollars. You ask where the money comes from, and he says, from your wallet, sir, you're paying for this ride. And it's like, nobody's really even riding it. So like from Effingham to Chicago or from Southern Illinois to Chicago, people aren't taking public transit, okay? Just make sure that we have got decent roads, drive on, and our gas is cheap. Okay, that's what we're asking for as Illinoisans. Now, this is what happens when you have bureaucrats who try to centrally plan transportation in a state that has more corn than commuters. Okay, we've got way more corn than commuters. People are not falling over each other to go to Chicago every single day. Okay, this is just idiocy. This is economic idiocy with a $1.5 billion price tag. So we've got more corn than commuters. We shouldn't pretend like people in Effingham want to go up to Chicago every single day, okay, or to drive public transit in general. Like, it's just economic idiocy. So the ringmaster of all of this, Governor J.B. Pritzker, he's hinted at a special session. People are calling for a special session because I guess regular session wasn't enough to dream up new ways to drain your bank account and to rob your tax dollars out of your wallet. So instead of talking about inflation, education, how the kids aren't doing well academically and performing well academically, crime, fentanyl, border issues, instead of talking about all of these things, the governor wants our elected representatives to go back to Springfield and, play SimCity with transit maps and, mess around with the Chicago Transit Authority. So here's what I'm going to call it. It is political theater designed to keep Chicago unions happy before the 2026 election. That is what this is. The calls for special session. It is a complete political theater. You think you're worried about your property tax bill now, your diesel fuel costs now. Just imagine if there's a per mileage tax slapped on you to fund the CTA. If you are worried about your taxes now or your fuel gas or your gas bill now, let's get real here. It's going to get much, much worse if you get a per mile tax slapped onto you. So he's worried, Governor J.B. Pritzker, he's worried about the CTA board endorsements, the fundraising dollars for all of his people. And this is really just political theater. So here's what they won't say out loud. Illinois is not just Chicago. Okay. In fact, the best parts of Illinois, the ones that still believe in faith, family, freedom, they aren't even within a metro ride. Like, they aren't even within a bus ride of the Windy City. Most of the best parts of Illinois are without reach from the Windy City. So we raise cattle, we grow soybeans, we grow corn, we build houses, we serve our communities. We don't live stacked up on top of each other like sardines, okay, with Wi-Fi. These policies coming from the Chicago Democrats, and let's not forget our state representative or our state House maps and our state Senate districts are also gerrymandered. So we have way more Chicago Democrats than we should have here in the state of Illinois. They show complete contempt for anyone who doesn't live in a high rise and votes blue. Okay, and we don't need a bailout. We need respect, fairness, and a little bit of decentralization. And Springfield really shouldn't be the ones dealing with the bailout in the first place. It should really be Chicago who deals with it, deals with their budget shortfall. So it's time to draw a line. This per mileage tax scheme is just the beginning. First, they track your mileage. Then they fine you for driving too much, okay? And then they're going to push you into electric cars bought from their crony taxpayers, or bought from their cronies at taxpayers' expense, okay? So they're going to push you into electric cars. They're going to tax you per mile. And that's another thing, too, with this per mileage tax. They want to shift you away from the gas-powered car. And if they shift you away from the gas-powered car, then they need to make up for those taxes. So they're going to push this per mile tax even harder because they're shifting everybody or trying to push you into buying an electric car that's made by their cronies at taxpayers' expense, for example. Rivian's tax credits, okay? The taxpayers, they are eating a cost for providing those tax credits. And they're building these electric cars, and they want you to be pushed into a Rivian to drive those. And of course, you're going to buy them from the cronies who get the taxpayer dollars, who then in turn are very appreciative for the tax credits. And then the CEOs at the top, funnel big donations into the coffers of the politicians who helped get them those tax credits and secure those tax credits. So call your senators, email your representatives, and show up at your county board meetings and start saying no to the Chicago bailout, say no to the mileage tax, and say yes to local control, liberty, and leadership that's rooted in truth. I do have to take a quick break. You're listening to Conservative Cat. I'll be right back. We're going to be talking about this Illinois Democrat who says that she's proud to be a Guatemalan before she's proud to be an American, which is just really fascinating. Her name is Delia Ramirez. She's a Democrat from Illinois, and she sparked some controversy here. We're going to get to that story here next. Smash that like button. Welcome back to Conservative Cat Clips, the place where we claw through the globalist garbage and we land on the truth. I'm your host, Kat, and today we are putting a spotlight on the topic the elites don't want to really talk about it all. That is the great American tech scam, and it is known as H-1B visa abuse. Now, let's get one thing straight. The H-1B visas, they were never meant to replace Americans. They were designed to fill critical skill gaps. The rare, highly skilled jobs, highly specialized jobs in the U.S. that no U.S. citizen was able to fulfill, and they weren't qualified to do so. So surprise, surprise, big tech twisted the law into a legal loophole, and now they're using it to import cheap foreign labor and kick the American worker to the curb. Okay, so if you want the receipts, I'll talk the numbers if you want to. You want to talk numbers? The U.S. government issues 85,000 H-1B visas every year, and nearly 70% of them come from India, workers from India. And they're mostly in IT and software jobs. And here's the kicker. Most of them aren't PhDs. They're not geniuses. No. They're mid-level coders and tech support, and they're doing jobs that qualified Americans are getting laid off from. Companies like Infosys, Tata, foreign outsourcing companies, they have become H-1B recipients, okay? Farming out workers to places like Google, Amazon, Facebook, and they're pushing out the United States citizen who demands fair pay. The United States citizens, I'm not doing slave labor. These companies like Infosys, they're foreign outsourcing giants, okay? And they've become top H-1B recipients, farming workers out to places. So they're the companies that get the workers, and then they give them to Google, Amazon, and Facebook. In fact, in a recent case, it shows this. Disney was training their own H-1B replacements before laying off the American workers. Yes, this is a recent case. That's not innovation, that's exploitation. So the American worker was quite literally training their worker, like their replacement. And Infosys and Tata, these foreign outsourcing giants, they supply these companies like Google, Amazon, and Facebook with the cheap labor. It's kind of like human trafficking, if you ask me. Like legal human trafficking, state-sanctioned human trafficking. And guess what? These visas are renewable for up to 6 years. So they lead to green cards. which means these jobs aren't temporary at all. So they're not just temporarily doing cheap labor here. They are quite literally being outsourced, these American workers. Don't even get me started on the wages. H-1B workers are often paid 20% or 40% less, anywhere between 20 to 40% less than the American counterpart. Why? Because these companies aren't hiring for skill. They're hiring for savings. That's what it is. And the real victims here are the American class, middle class, the American worker, especially in STEM. They went to college, they want these jobs, and now they lose everything. They took out all these loans and they lose their job, and now they're told, sorry, we got to give your job to someone cheaper from overseas, and we're going to call it diversity. That's what they're doing in these big tech jobs, Google, Facebook, Amazon. And where's the government? Half asleep and bought off, because these H-1B abusers, they have got armies of lobbyists in Washington, D.C., and they are pushing this to increase the cap every year of how many H-1B visa workers can be awarded their visas. So I said it was 85,000 a year. Well, they've got these lobbyists like your Infosys, your your giants, your H-1B visas, these foreign outsourcing company giants. They're down in Washington, D.C., and they are lobbying, and they are pushing to increase this cap from 85,000 every year to more and more and more. And they're claiming there's a worker shortage. No, honey, there's a wage shortage. There's a big difference. This is Cat signing off, conservative Cat clips. Here's the truth. Hiring foreign labor at the expense of the American workers and innovation, it's betrayal, it's treason, and it's business. It's betrayal in a business suit. That's what it is. It's just a straight up it's time to cap the scam. It's time to get rid of the scam, put American talent first, and this country needs to stop outsourcing its own people. It's been conservative Cat clips. Hey, go ahead and smash that like button. Share this out with your friends. I so do appreciate it. Keep an eye on Illinois 9th Kat Agabazale's campaign to succeed Congresswoman Jane Schakowsky in 2026. Yeah, Kat Agabazale is absolutely insane. California 17th Congresswoman, Congressman Ro Khanna endorsed Agabazale last week. Yeah, Agabazale is, I don't know if she's like, I think that she's going to get it because of how insane she is on social media. Like, she is a social media influencer and she's got a lot of clout, but she's extremely radical, folks. Agabazale. So yeah, went as far as to say illegal immigrants should get free healthcare, like on CNN out loud. Scott Jennings blasted her for that, but yeah, Kat Agabazale has money to back her campaign. Yes, she is a very successful social media influencer, young, and I don't doubt that she's going to win that seat. And that's scary because we're going to get more squad members. Okay. Probably just as scary as Democrat Representative Delia Ramirez. Sorry, I'm like chewing all over my words this morning. She has sparked controversy after reportedly declaring at a second annual Pan American Congress held in Mexico. So this is like a Mexico summit, essentially. And she declared that she's a proud Guatemalan before she's an American. Okay, so this has sparked some controversy. Obviously, she is, really announcing and pledging her allegiance to a foreign country over America, and is the way I see it. And I say reportedly because people who have translated what she has said here, and I'll play it here in just a second. It's a very quick clip where she says, "I'm a proud Guatemalan before I am an American." But people are translating this because she said it in Spanish, and they're saying that that's what she said. So Ramirez, whose husband is a DACA recipient, Okay, not saying that all DACA recipients are terrible. There are some that have committed very heinous crimes, and this was an unconstitutional thing. DACA is a terrible thing, and granting amnesty to these people is a move that I hope that Donald Trump does not make. There's been whispers that he was going to grant amnesty for DACA. These people, in some cases, are like Gabriel Calixto, who stabbed allegedly and was never really convicted of it, Emma Schaefer, and murdered her, allegedly. And prior to that, he was a DACA recipient who had been convicted of kidnapping charges, got those pled down to unlawful restraint of a separate girl. Katie O'Brien was that victim. And that all happened right here in Illinois. Okay. He's pictured Gabriel Calixto with Dick Durbin. I've talked about this story several times. So not all DACA recipients are like these little abuelas. Okay. Some of them are very violent criminals who have abused their status, have abused the DACA really privilege. Okay, so I bring this up because her husband is a DACA recipient. Not that he's a bad guy or anything like that, but she defines her marriage on her campaign website as mixed status. And apparently she made some very controversial remarks over the weekend. And Daily Caller has described this as a radical summit organized by the director of an anti-American organization. So this is the second annual Pan American Congress, and it was held in Mexico. So this was a Mexican summit. And here, I'll just share with you what she said, and then we'll translate it for you. Take a listen.
Porque yo soy guatemalteca con mucho orgullo, primero que soy americana. Decir unas palabras en español porque yo soy guatemalteca con mucho orgullo, primero que soy americana.
Okay, so apparently what she says there, translated, is I'm a proud Guatemalan before I am an American, she told the group while speaking Spanish. And the Daily Caller informs us that they confirmed the translation of her statement with multiple Spanish speakers. So in addition to those controversial remarks, it's been reported that Ramirez Ramirez denigrated the United States for, and like just take a crap. She took a crap all over America in this speech for being addicted to war. So she said that the United States was addicted to war. She accused the country, which she is a public servant of, by the way, she is a congresswoman. She accused the country of imperialism, militarization, conquest, control, and competition in its attempt at domination. So, like, she is accusing America of trying to cause world domination or whatever, conquesting other nations. I mean, this is somebody who is supposed to be a public servant. So now we have the White House firing back in response to the Democrat Congresswoman's alleged comments about her wanting to be, or her being a Guatemalan before she's an American. Like, really what the way I take this is that she is pledging an allegiance to a foreign country, which is wild to me, on tape in front of everybody. Now, she also said things like America is pro-war, that they are addicted to war, that they are imperialist, and that we are attempting world domination. This is crazy for a sitting congresswoman to say these things. So other high-profile members in Congress, like AOC, who we will get to, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, they've said similar things. Okay, and here's what the White House spokesperson said, because the White House fired back at Democrat Ramirez for her comments here. She said Liz Huston of the White House said the Democrats' comments are despicable and underscore their commitment to putting America last. So the Democrats, plural. So sure, she's talking about all the Democrats: Ramirez, Omar, Ayanna Pressley, the squad members. She called them despicable. The spokesman for the White House. In stark contrast, President Donald Trump is working tirelessly to secure peace deals, deport illegal aliens, and advance America's interests at home and abroad. So, in addition to that statement, the Department of Homeland Security issued a response of sorts, quoting Teddy Roosevelt. So, they responded specifically to the Ramirez comments. They said, "There is no room in this country for hyphenated Americanism." The quote reads, "Americanism is a matter of spirit and soul. Our allegiance must be purely to the United States. We must unsparingly condemn any man who holds any other allegiance." Okay, it's unconstitutional. The 14th Amendment is pretty clear about this. You are a United States citizen, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. This kind of is a connotation, like it means there's an allegiance. Like when you're a U.S. citizen, you have an allegiance to that country, and you can't have an allegiance to another country. This is why, and we'll find out Ramirez here, she actually crossed the border as a baby in the womb. So her mother was pregnant and crossed the border. She was a border jumper. And this is, I argue, the 14th Amendment, people use this for birthright citizenship. Birthright citizenship is dumb. And the reason for that is because there's two parts of it. You have to be born in the United States, but you also be subject to the jurisdiction thereof and not have any other foreign allegiance. I would say that Ramirez probably, if we were to deem birthright citizenship not a thing, and we actually clarify subject to the jurisdiction thereof legislatively through Congress. I've talked about this before. We should do that. And we clarify that 14th Amendment. I don't think Ramirez is technically a citizen. I'm going to say that. In my opinion, when I read the 14th Amendment, it's pretty clear that there has to be an allegiance, and she clearly just denied her allegiance on tape. So Ramirez, whose own campaign website states that her mother crossed the border while pregnant with her, in which CNN has reported the trek involving crossing the Rio Grande. So her mother was pregnant, crossed the Rio Grande. So Ramirez is part of a group of Democrats demanding more radical action and protesting the deportation of illegals and going outside of ICE facilities. So she's calling for that. We know that her mother crossed illegally while she was pregnant and had Ramirez here, and I'm assuming she gets this birthright citizenship. I hope that legislatively we can condemn birthright citizenship just outright. Like birthright citizenship, there has to be more than just being born here. There has to be criteria where your allegiance is to the country, meaning your parents are either naturalized as citizens or they're born here. Okay. So she said this, according to Axios. Here's what Ramirez says: "I think we should be doubling down. I think you'll be hearing from our members, and this is what we need to be spending next week. We need to be spending our time next week doing these visits." So as far as visits go, she means these ICE facility visits, where they protest these outside these ICE facilities, and they do these visits at these detention centers. She goes on, she says, "I'm prepared to go to the detention centers in Indiana. And if they're going to arrest me, then so be it." So they want radical action outside of these ICE facilities, outside of these detention centers, and they want to be loud, and they want to protest the deportation of the illegals, and she's calling for that. And, you know, I really just don't think that she has an allegiance to this country. Her statements here, if she did in fact say, like, "I don't speak Spanish," maybe if somebody who speaks Spanish wants to throw it in the comments section, if she did in fact say that, I mean, I'm getting, Spanish translation. I'm thrown into the translator. It says that, I'm a Guatemalan before I'm an American. To me, that is treasonous type talk. I mean, it's swearing an allegiance to a foreign country. Okay. And she's a sitting member of Congress. There's something really, really wrong with that. And this goes to prove my point that birthright citizenship isn't enough. Okay, just being born here isn't enough. You have to be subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, which means you have to have an alliance. The translation is accurate. Thank you. I appreciate it. You speak Spanish, Mr. Lopez. I could have guessed that given the last name. But yeah, so sad. I think it's borderline treasonous. So I do want to get to this story as well. AOC. And this is kind of shocking. Now, when I picture somebody like a parody of a clueless, ethically challenged communist, socialist, urban politician, and if you were just to stereotype, a leftist politician in your head, you would get somebody like AOC, like real life AOC. She fits the mold, okay? If you were to create like this caricature of a liberal politician, a communist socialist politician, it would be AOC. So she is now, now we know she is a former bartender. She claims to have this economics degree, and I know that she wouldn't know the first thing about free market economy. She wouldn't know the free economic principles if it was stapled to her forehead, okay, or to her nose. She doesn't know anything about the economy, in my opinion, and she's just a joke. She's just a straight up caricature, okay, AOC, first of all. So we have to know who we're dealing with. When we get into this story, she finds herself in some pretty hot ethical water. And the burner is on. It is bubbling. This question is bubbling. And here's the question. Is she married or not? So new, this just in, the House Ethics Committee has rebuked AOC for simultaneously claiming that her longtime partner, Riley Roberts, is and isn't her spouse. So she simultaneously says that he is and that he isn't. Okay. This has allowed AOC to grant her spouse special perks and freebies while also shielding his financial affairs from the public. When you are a spouse of a sitting congressman, there are certain things that happen or that have to happen. You have to disclose, your financial affairs. You have to be transparent. You are a member. You are the family member, a spouse of a sitting congressman. So there's certain transparency that has to go on there. And you also get perks. And we'll get into a few of those perks and what those are. But what kind of shift? This is the kind of shift that I'm playing on the word there, that I'd expect from Democrats. Okay. I see this kind of stuff all the time, the nepotism, my spouse serving in like a lower form of government, I'm serving in a higher form of government. It happens locally a lot of the time, which is really weird. There's actually been pushes at a legislative level, state legislative level. I think it was Chapin Rose who had pushed something like this, where your family member can't serve in the same level of we shouldn't have in McLean County. We have a McLean County board member. His name is Corey Byrne, and he and his wife is now a Bloomington city councilman, and she's serving in a lower level of government, but they're both spouses, and that's runs kind of. There's kind of a conflict of interest. So just recently, I'm going down a rabbit hole here, but I'll get back to AOC. McLean County, they were sitting on like almost a surplus of money in this fund. It was like $20 million. And of course, Bloomington wanted a piece of the pie and Normal wanted a piece of the pie. This was for like mental behavior or whatever. They had set this money aside. It was a sales tax that they implemented, and they were sitting on this big pile of cash. And the local municipalities have been, wanting some of this cash. You could see where there's a potential conflict of interest there, being that there's a Bloomington city councilman who happens to be the spouse of somebody who's serving on McLean County, who has, somewhat of a say over that funding and over that pile of cash that his wife or his wife's entity, his wife's local municipality wants. So you see where there's potential conflict of interest there. Anyway, I mean, this is pretty much like the kind of Adam Schiff, I'm playing on words, that I'd expect from Democrats. So according to the Washington Free Beacon, they've got more of the story here. The committee's rebuke stems from a lengthy explanation AOC's attorney provided to justify why the New York lawmaker accepted a free ticket worth $35,000 for Roberts, that's her non-husband husband, Riley Roberts, to attend the 2021 Met Gala. So he gets a free ticket to the tune of $35,000 alongside her. Okay, so at the time, this was a gift AOC could only accept for her legally married spouse. Okay, so you have to, in order to get the free ticket, you have to have a legally married spouse to get the ticket to get in. Okay. She has lived with Robert since 2016, and the pair became engaged in 2022, but there's no evidence that the couple has legally tied the knot, and AOC hasn't been pictured wearing an engagement ring in public since November 2023. So despite that, AOC says Roberts is considered her spouse. Her attorney, David Mitrani, explained all of this to the House Ethics Committee in a May 16th letter. Now, Roberts, is only considered her spouse in the context of federal campaign law, according to Mitrani, her attorney, an interpretation AOC has used to grant her partner several privileges, typically afforded to those who are legally married spouses of lawmakers. So there are certain perks for people who are legally married to lawmakers, okay? Now, according to the attorney, that her spouse is her spouse only according to campaign finance law. So I don't know how that's possible, but we're going to get into that. That includes securing Roberts a free ride, of course, to the 2021 Met Gala. But later in 2023, he was gifted travel to Japan. He's been gifted travel to South Korea. And Mitrani, the attorney here, AOC's attorney, revealed in his letter that Roberts has also owned a congressional pin. So what is this little pin that they wear? The spouses of lawmakers, the legal spouses of lawmakers, they wear a little pin. And he's had this spouse pin since 2019. And this grants him certain access to parts of the Capitol complex not usually accessible by the public. Okay. So you've heard of Aristotle's rule, right? Where the rule of non-contradiction applies here. Two contradictory statements of fact cannot both be simultaneously true. Right? So one has got to be false. It's either AOC, because like there's not, he's just considered my spouse legally when it comes to campaign finance law. That's not how that goes. Okay. You can't be married to this guy and then not be married to him at the same time. Okay. Like she's been really playing, I think, like with the ethic rules here, and she seems to be getting away with it. Now, Riley Roberts, if I was this dude, I'd wake up every morning with some gratitude, okay, that I'm not legally married to this woman. And I would get out of here. You wouldn't have to, you can get out, you can bail without a legal divorce proceeding and a lengthy proceeding. And, you know, if he were to suffer a sudden rush of brains to his head, I hope he'd realize, you know, he's in a very lucky position right now. But the House Ethics Committee, I don't know how you're married to leftists. Like, I don't know how that works. I really don't know how people would get married to leftists. They're just so damn sensitive. Like, I wouldn't be able to not offend my spouse in the home. And I don't know how you walk around on eggshells with somebody who's like that far left and that far gone. But anyway, you know, if I'm praying that Roberts, he gets, you know, a sudden rush of brains here and leaves. And thank goodness I'd wake up with some gratitude every morning that he doesn't have to go through legal proceedings to get a lengthy divorce. or go through a lengthy divorce. But AOC here, it's interesting because essentially what her reply here through her attorney is, so what? So what? This obviously looks bad. I've said this and this. These are two contradictory statements. They can't both be true at the same time. I'm either married or I'm not. And essentially, she's answered this question, hey, are you married, to as so what? Like, and if there's one thing AOC has to spare, it is this overwhelming sense of self-righteousness. And it doesn't seem like she's going to change her behavior or come out and say, hey, we're kind of in a situationship. He's pretty much my domestic partner. Like, there is a legal proceeding or a legal document where you can become domestic partners or something. It's not as strong as a marriage. I don't know the ins and outs of domestic partnership, but like, she's got to do something. Like, we don't want to make that step, but I see him as my long-term partner. We just don't want to legalize it for personal reasons or for religious reasons, whatever. If she were to just come out and say that, I think I could, kind of get behind that a little bit. I think it'd be dumb, but personally, but not as dumb as, and not as bad. And it doesn't look as bad when she pretty much comes out and says, so what? Like, try to explain yourself. You're giving him all of these perks and you guys aren't legally married. Come out and try to justify it. Say, hey, it's a piece of paper. I think that I'm married to him and I don't know why these perks should only be, use it as a time to get on your soapbox. I'd hate to give advice to AOC, but use it as a soapbox opportunity and spiel your leftist crap. She isn't probably going to change her behavior. She's not going to come out and kind of give an explanation for this ethical hot water that she's in. I doubt she's ever going to face any kind of serious consequences for this. I mean, this was a $35,000 ticket to the Met Gala that I got for free. That would have been nice. I would have loved it. Actually, no, I don't really have any interest in going to the Met Gala, but I'm sure some people would love to go. Why does he get to go? And somebody else doesn't, like a member of the public doesn't, just because he's not married to, like, it's not fair, and she needs to come out and explain herself. Now, I do think that she's going to be a shoo-in for her reelection of her far left district. Okay, she's going to be able to hold on to the admiration of her leftist seals, her nincompoops, who clap like trained seals every time she buzzes around the country in a private jet with the old man from Vermont, Bernie Sanders, to run their yaps about the oligarchy. Okay, they're going to clap for her and they're going to continue to vote her in, and she's a shoo-in for the re-election bid in her leftist campaign or leftist district. So yes, AOC is ethically challenged, and yes, despite us pointing and laughing, she's going to be sitting there right there in her House seat for as long as she wants, unless she runs for Senate. And I'm really hoping she runs for like president or White House, like tries to get the White House position. That would be fascinating to watch. All right, let's get to some of your comments. The House Ethics Committee oversees discipline under the Ethics and Government Act for members and candidates of the U.S. House of Representatives. Yeah, so this all went before the House Ethics Committee, and the attorney pretty much gave an explanation that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, that her spouse is only her spouse in the context of campaign finance law, which is just bizarro. That's not how marriages work. You don't just get to pick and choose what parts of the law you guys are considered spouses, okay, legal spouses. You don't get to pick and choose that. You're either legally married or you're not. So, yeah. How about someone producing a marriage license from the state of New York? Yeah, well, that's the problem, is nobody has been able to produce evidence that she is actually married. There is no marriage license from what anybody can find. So that's where the rub is it seems like, by all appearances, and I'm just looking at this objectively, it looks like she is not married to this guy. And yet he gets all kinds of special privileges. Now, the one that really bothers me, because this is a matter of national security and the House Ethics Committee should really have some consequences here for her, is the pin. So the spouse congressional pin that you wear on your shirt, and it gets you into all kinds of places. In the Capitol, like that is a big deal because we're talking about national security now. There's a reason why spouses are granted certain access points than members of the public. Okay, like I don't think I have to go into why the distinction has to be made if he is her spouse or not. Legally, there has to be a distinction if he's going to be getting some of these privileges or getting access to some of the parts of the Capitol. I remember AOC running for U.S. Senate in 2028. Oh, thinking AOC. Remember AOC thinking of running for U.S. Senate in 2028 for Chuck Schumer's seat, especially if he retires. AOC has more name ID than Governor J.B. Pritzker nationwide. Yeah, and then there's been polls too for the 2028 presidential candidate. JB, he pulls in at like 2%, because he's got zero name recognition, and really he's got like as much riz as like an ant. Okay. Governor J.B. Pritzker has no riz. One thing I will give AOC is that, much like Kat Agabzaleh, who we were talking about earlier, she has social media riz, and she will stay in her leftist district for as long as she wants, because she's trained her SEALs, her nincompoop voters, who are brainwashed into believing everything that she says, and brainwashed into believing, her going on these like Bernie Sanders tours to fight the oligarchy. She's actually doing something. Okay. She's at least got some riz. Governor J.B. Pritzker has got no riz. The only reason why Governor J.B. Pritzker is governor is because of how corrupt Illinois is and the money. Okay. His money has gotten him to where he's at. And like I said, I don't think that the direction of the Democrat Party, the establishment, so the puppeteers behind Joe Biden, think of those people, the administration, the Barack Obama administration, so the puppeteers, I don't think that they want somebody like a Governor J.B. Pritzker. For all that Governor J.B. Pritzker is, he is an ambitious guy. He's talented. He knows he knows how money works. And he knows the people, the players. And I don't think they want a threatening guy. He threatens their power because of his ambition. And I think that they would really prefer someone in there who has no idea what she's talking about, which is AOC, or Kamala Harris, or Jasmine Crockett. I think that they would much prefer somebody in there who has no idea what's going on, so that way they can continue to run the scenes, or run everything behind the scenes, the Democrat elite or the Democrat establishment. Okay. That's going to do it for us today. I appreciate you being here. Smash that like button, share this out with your friends. Subscribe to the channel while you're here. We'll be back tomorrow morning, bright and early, 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. It's the Daily Show, Conservative Cat. Head on over to patriotpumpenergy.com. Buy your bottle of Patriot Pump today. It's a premium pre-workout, no artificial colorings, and not a ton of caffeine to try to get you addicted like those energy drinks do. Definitely worth the buy. Promo code Conservative Cat at checkout. Bye-bye.